Joining me now from the Associated Press in Washington is Eric Tucker. He's the AP's Justice Department reporter. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's start with the president's comments on the travel ban. He has called the judge who suspended it a so-called judge. He also suggested people blame the court system if, quote, something happens, presumably meaning a terrorist attack. What do you make of that?
It's certainly very unorthodox. I can't think of another situation in which a sitting president has sort of so directly attacked a member of the judiciary. The implications seem to be that a judge does not have the authority to issue an order, which is an unusual assertion. Certainly there's a separation between the executive branch and the judicial branch, and so the judge was doing what he believed to be was his job. So it was certainly unusual and unorthodox for a president to take that approach.
And the use of the term so-called judge, I mean, you know, clearly social media is having a field day with those comments. Not just social media, in fact, you know, all across traditional media outlets, people are questioning the president's use of that term. I mean, what are your sources saying to you about a president of the United States, so the executive branch, calling the judicial branch, the judiciary, so-called?
Well, it certainly puts the Justice Department in a difficult position, because certainly judges on the Ninth Circuit are reading that they're aware of what President Trump has said, and so you can envision a scenario in which they ask the Justice Department when they're in court, so is this true? Is this judge a so-called judge? Can you defend it? Which presumably you can't defend that kind of comment. And so you can imagine a situation in which the Justice Department is going to be asked to account for a statement made by the person who is ostensibly their boss, the President of the United States.
Eric, let me turn your attention to a story out by the New York Times reporting that the White House is reorganizing a bit. Sources say the president will now be read in on executive orders earlier in the process than before. And there's a telling line from the piece by Glenn Thrush and Maggie Haberman. I'm going to read it for our viewers. But for the moment, Mr. Bannon, that is Steve Bannon, the counselor to the president, remains the president's dominant advisor, despite Mr. Trump's anger that he was not fully briefed on details of the executive order he signed, giving his chief strategist a seat on the National Security Council. A greater source of frustration to the president than the fallout from the travel ban. There are a lot of people that are wondering, how is it that the president could put his name to an executive order and not fully understand what's in that order?
It's a good question. I mean, I suppose that there are elements of the substance that he was not aware of, but certainly the general overarching policy is consistent with the campaign pledge, which was to protect America's borders. And so certainly the president was aware that this step was being taken in terms of, just generally speaking, we need to do something to deal with the refugee problem. It's something he had been talking about for months. He actually had even said Christians were being disadvantaged, Christian refugees were being disadvantaged in favor of Muslim refugees. So he has discussed the problem. Rudy Giuliani has also talked about it publicly. So even though the president might not have been aware of the fine point and the fine prints of the actual executive order, certainly it was consistent with what he had been saying both as president and as a candidate.
And of course, the president has tweeted in response to this. I'm going to read it for our viewers. The failing New York Times writes total fiction concerning me. They've gotten it wrong for 2 years and now are making up stories and sources. Let's talk, Eric, about the remarks that President Trump made to Fox's Bill O'Reilly over the weekend on Russia, comparing the United States to Russia and saying, quote, "What do you think? Our country's so innocent." Those comments have now been denounced by several prominent Republicans. Could this cause problems for the president within his own party going forward, let alone the Democrats, who that's a whole different situation there?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of interest and scrutiny and confusion, frankly, about President Trump's seeming affinity for the Russian government, his expressions of respect for Vladimir Putin, which is a government that historically has been at direct odds with the United States. And so in a lot of ways, what President Trump said last night is in keeping with his sort of interest in maintaining a good relationship or some sort of balance with the Russian government and with Vladimir Putin in particular. Although it was surprising in a certain sense to hear it from the President of the United States, it seemed less surprising to hear it from President Trump, given everything that we know about his past comments. He has been clearly very reluctant and reticent to publicly criticize or condemn Vladimir Putin or Russia.
All right, Eric Tucker from the AP. Thanks so much for joining us, Eric. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Great. I appreciate it.